When we were talking, you and I, about politics a little while ago, you said something that I thought was very interesting, which was that generally speaking, like the funnier candidate will prevail when you're talking about
Yes.
something like
Sadly, that's one of my
like
theories.
yeah, it's one of your theories, and then you suggested something really interesting to me, which was like you were thinking maybe we should try and now the dynamic of this particular election is now completely changed. Like in my opinion, Joe, is heavily favored in the polls now, and we're in the midst of a crisis, and so like the humor test, like at this point, everyone's like, screw that, like I'd rather just like a return to sanity. But there was a there was a suggestion you had that I thought was really interesting. You were like, maybe we should get some comedy writers together to like write some good scripts or lines for whoever the Democratic nominee may end up being. And I mean, obviously, we're in a different moment now, but I thought that there was something really powerful to like your general thinking on it, which is that at this point, politicians are communicators. And there's like certain language they use to communicate, that is hitting with certain groups of Americans, like maybe less so for others. But I was part of these debates, Judd, and it was clear to me that some of the candidates definitely had jokes that they'd rehearsed.
Yes.
They certainly had stuff
Yes.
that they'd like practiced.
Sure.
And we do have these debates upcoming between Joe and Donald Trump that may be one of the only set of events that could potentially even change the dynamic of the race meaningfully.
I think that, in America, unfortunately, so much of it is entertainment, and people are taken in by charisma, sense of humor, attractiveness, and a lot of the presidents from the past that maybe had, were not appealing to look at or listen to, but who happened to be brilliant. Maybe some of those people would not be elected today. There are a lot of people who are incredible at their jobs who are really not pleasant to talk to or look at. They're not funny, but maybe they're just amazing at making the correct choices or thoughtful, difficult choices. And if you look back, and I joke about this, but I do think it's true, you tend to see that the slightly more entertaining or warmer candidate often wins. I mean, when Al Gore lost, I remember being pretty shocked because when you watch the debates, George Bush was terrible in those debates, but he did have a certain charm about him, and the country was doing great at that moment. The economy was very strong.
Have a beer with competition. I remember that,
and it was almost like the country had a Clinton fatigue, a scandal fatigue, and they weren't factoring in the fact that the country was operating in for our country pretty well. The economy was doing very well. It wasn't the moment to toss out the Democrats.
Prosperity, yeah.
But a bored country is seeking entertainment and a friend, and I think that has happened many times in our history where we're attracted to that. And I think you might say the same thing about Donald Trump, where he's more of an aggressive insult comic, and people didn't pay attention to the fact that he had ripped off a lot of students, that he didn't pay his bills, that he was awful to women. There were so many very clear signals to us that he was corrupt and not empathetic and a dangerous person. But people bought into, his bravado, his entertainment factor, and he had no record. So it was easy for him to say Hillary Clinton is corrupt because he hadn't held any elective office. He didn't have to come through on any of his promises. I think if you look at what happened, he really didn't accomplish any of the things that he was talking about.
Yeah, what you're saying is spot on, Judd, and this is one of like the great dynamics that I'm scratching my head about, to some level with concern, which is that it seems like politics and entertainment have merged, and at least in some respects. And then if you have some larger than life figure that millions of Americans, in the case of Donald Trump, felt like they knew from The Apprentice and other things, then he overrode a lot of other, like the rest of the Republican field. And then it was him against Hillary. He seemed somehow more entertaining and appealing and like quote unquote authentic.
Sure.
And in the Democratic field too, there was something that happened, and I was the beneficiary of this, so it's not a knock. But like, let's say you have folks like Steve Bullock, governor of Montana, who makes a late entrance into the race, or Michael Bennet, senator from Colorado, who like people didn't find particularly like exciting or whatnot. That they got ignored and blown off more or less. And then if you have like the magical Asian man who wants to give everyone money and like who came from the internet, then like I became more of like a figure, in part because like I was more interesting. Now this is not something I think is necessarily like a super positive in
Yes.
American like politics. You know, like I happen to think both Steve Bullock and Michael Bennet deserved more attention than they got from voters or from folks in the know. And it's one reason why you have people suggesting completely seriously that The Rock should run for president, or like someone that we all know,
Tucker Carlson or Kanye.
Tucker Carlson, like on the Republican side, who is like a commentator and entertainer, but at this point the things have kind of merged, where if you have like a very prominent public persona, then that actually is like a massive value add in terms of your political currency.
Absolutely, and it's scary. I mean, we don't quite understand the Kanye West's motivations. There are some people who would read something into it about him wanting to split the vote. And then other people who think like, no, the whole thing is just a manic episode, and there is no logic behind it or vision. He's just having a meltdown. But regardless, they say in certain states when they did some quick polling, maybe he already had 2% or 4%. And that's what's scary about the idea of unqualified people jumping in, because clearly our country has not been discerning enough to say, I don't think being on The Apprentice is enough to run the country. I don't think having those bankruptcies and running hotels makes this person qualified. And so we are scared when we hear Trump's kids are going to run one day, or Tucker Carlson, or The Rock, where you think, oh no, I want someone who really understands how government works. I want somebody who has a vision that I agree with. I don't want it to just be somebody who's popular. Now, it's not impossible that a famous person can turn out to be a wise, thoughtful, good president. But man, the percentages of that are probably still pretty scary, pretty low. And we see it with Donald Trump now. His lack of experience means he doesn't really understand how to work government. He doesn't know how to get masks made. He doesn't know how to get enough test tubes so that you could do the testing. And he doesn't want to. He literally doesn't even want to find out how to do it because he is lazy. He clearly has educational issues. He doesn't think well. And so he says, let the governors handle it, because he can't manage a gigantic bureaucracy. And we need people that know how to do that.
You know what's tough, Judd, is, and I generally agree with a lot of what you just said. Just so many Americans have looked up and been like, man, this stuff's not been working for us. And even when you and I talked about like the good times of when Al Gore was running in 2000, and you made the caveat, which was right, is like relatively speaking, things were good at that point, even
compared to now.
Yeah, compared to now. But we also recognize that that there have been a lot of people left behind, even like the relatively good times. These bad times are showing just how exposed many American families are, where there's just financial insecurity everywhere, and and many Americans have felt excluded from even the gains that have been made. And there's so many Americans that just look up and be like, man, like even under the Democrats, my factory was closing, my Main Street stores were closing because of Amazon. Like they look up and they're like not sure. In my opinion, that's one of the things that fuels like our interest in these folks from outside government, because because people have lost faith in a lot of things in our society.
Sure.
But like one of the things they've lost faith in is that if they get like the other party into power in DC, that things will meaningfully change, where like in their school or on their street, or these things. Now, all of that said, I'm obviously very pro Biden. I've endorsed him. I've been doing everything I can to help. And I get the sense from what you've just said that you are also pulling for Team Joe
yes.
in the fall. I don't think that's like much of a stretch. So would love to hear like what you're seeing, and also if there are particular races that you're like focused on outside of the big kahuna race between Joe and Donald Trump, whether there are some political candidates that have caught your eye. Certainly on our side, there are a number of candidates that I'm trying to help and elevate, like at the local levels, and was wondering if there were people that you were working with on that side.
Well, I think that it's very important that the Democrats will win the Senate, because I think if you're to envision what the next 4 years would be if Joe Biden was the president, we're going to be in the midst of the pandemic into next year, maybe beyond into 22. It also might be something that is around in some form chronically, where it's like the flu in the sense that we're getting shots every year.
Yeah.
And what if the shot only works 50% of the time? I mean, the flu shot, we all get it. And some years we're like, oh, they didn't get the right one this year. So we don't know how many years we're going to be dealing with this where it's very serious. Hopefully there'll be some sort of, medicines that help us, even if we do get it, where it's not as dangerous. We don't know yet, but that could play out over years.
Yes.
So we have to also assume that the country will be very impatient for solutions from the next president. Economic solutions for the disaster that's clearly coming from all of this, and also the medical issues. And if something really meaningful does not happen, then the Joe Biden will be a one-term president. There's a chance he's a one-term president anyway. Maybe another Democrat will run after 4 years. And so without the Senate, I don't think he'll be able to make large-scale, meaningful change in the country and be able to fix a lot of what we've learned about how badly our institutions work. I mean, we're basically finding out on a daily basis that on almost any issue, you could take it to the Supreme Court. It takes years, and you don't actually get solutions. You can't even find out if you're allowed to, if the Congress is allowed to subpoena people to speak to committees, right? We're still not sure if they're allowed to force people to answer questions, to be held accountable for their work for the country. And you could kick the can down the street on almost anything in the courts, right? So the justice system is a complete mess. The courts are a complete mess. And my concern is that if things don't turn around and it goes right back to the Republicans in 4 years, and what it will be is a smarter Donald Trump, a less demented Donald Trump with the same long-term vision. I mean, Donald Trump is not a very efficient person. We don't even know how much of these choices he makes are his, or just the people around him who are able to get ideas through this strange man. When I hear that, like, they're not going to let, they try to not let students stay in the country if their college switches to Zoom classes. I don't think Donald Trump was in a room and thought that up.
That is the thing that many people are concerned about, Judd, is like, imagine competent and malevolent, as opposed to, and
Tom Cotton, there's all these people that are truly dangerous, that it could swing back to them very quickly if the country's still struggling in a few years. And you know what? The country will be struggling. And so what can a president who controls the Congress and the Senate do in terms of health care, in terms of larger changes?
Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.